Hey, I'm Matt Berman. I make educational content all about artificial intelligence.
I just want to talk to you about hallucinations. Do you see them as a form of creativity in any way?
Possibly, by the way, did you see the Anthropic paper where they detailed why hallucinations happen? It's essentially when the model like if you ask a question to a model and it knows very little, but just enough. So the default mode for the model is to say, I don't know, right? Whenever it doesn't know something. But if it knows just a little bit, just enough to start to answer your question, it will attempt to answer that question and then complete it, even if it doesn't have the rest of the information to actually complete it. Yeah, and that's actually kind of how jailbreaking works too. There's this momentum inside of these models that really affects how they work. I think part of it is creativity. I don't know. To be honest, when I'm using these models, I'm not really using them for creativity. I haven't seen so although like you can set the temperature and they'll become, each of the responses are more or less different than other previous generations. I don't necessarily think they're super creative. I just think the non-deterministic nature is being highlighted through the hallucinations.
How would you define artificial intelligence? There's kind of a fuzzy kind of understanding of it in some circles. What seems like it resonates best with you, and how close are we?
I just define it as a machine that can think. And what does thinking actually mean? Right now, it's predicting the next token and being able to actually have conversations and reason and logic. And so I define artificial intelligence as we have taught the machine how to learn rather than hard coding it. And I think previously that was just called machine learning, but now it's artificial intelligence.
Is there any moment that you just like it was totally like a personal story where you just were astonished by um, what you saw a result? Like one time I asked a question about if you know Calvin and Hobbes, like Susie Durkins was
Sure.
Calvin's like kind of frenemy slash friend, and I said like, what do you think they do if they're adults now? Like predict their jobs, and it gave me like 40% chance that Susie's like a lawyer, and then like 30% chance she like works as a teacher or something like that, and I was just kind of astonished because I was like, it would take me a while, and I like the comic strip quite a bit to like even think through and put that out, and it felt emotionally surprising and kind of a wow moment. Have you ever had anything like that, or something come to mind?
Yeah, so I think I have one of those every week, but I'll give you a few examples. When I first saw O1 and the thinking, the chain of thought, I just was absolutely blown away. Being able to actually see the thinking and the logic and the reasoning behind these models in real time was just mind blowing to me. So that was one, and just realizing how realistic it sounded, and I could, instruct it to sound like I wanted it to, respond and have the tone that I wanted it to. That was another moment where I was just completely blown away. And then a third one, which happened more recently. I planted a lemon tree, and I didn't think it was doing all that well. And so I took out my camera, advanced voice mode, but I gave it access to the camera and I pointed my camera at the plant and I was just like, okay, well, first of all, what is this? And it knew. And it's like, well, because of these white buds and this, and it looks like a citrus tree, most likely a lemon tree. I was like, okay, fantastic. Now look at the leaves and tell me, does this look healthy? And it kind of went through and it says, okay, the leaves towards the top look healthy. They're green and shiny, but the leaves towards the bottom don't look as good. And I said, okay, I'm going to zoom in, and I moved it, and I said, okay, well, what can I do? What can I do to improve the health of this lemon tree? And it was just so easy and so natural to have this conversation with an expert about something that I was trying to learn. And it was real time, and it just, I don't know, that it was so cool to use that for that use case.
You're right. Thinking about thinking is special because we wish we could, like, I wish I could do that with other people. Like when I'm at meetings and I say something and I wish I could hear them being like, oh, Dylan's like trying to sound smart, but I'm not buying it right now. Or like, but I'll say this. Actually, One of the most interesting chain of thought I've ever seen was someone on Medium. I wish I could remember the author, but they asked ChatGPT to pick a random number. And in the chain of thought, it was like the user wants me to pick a random number at random, and I'm not allowed to use a calculator or any other tools. The first number that comes to my head is 7, but seven's really obvious. And I think like everyone would predict 7. So I'm going to try something more obscure like 37. And then like it was just felt like exactly like me stressing out if somebody asked me a question like that in life, and you're trying to fix it and like act random, but you can't. It was so fascinating.
That by the way, that exact thought is what I got. Like, oh, pick a number 1 through 10. First number I think of is 7, and then of course, well, everybody picks 7. Let me pick a different number. Maybe it's because that was written down on the internet, used for the training data so many times. So many people had that reflection internally,
Mm.
and then kind of documented it. That's how that model started to think that way. So yeah, it is fascinating because the chain of thought, it doesn't necessarily feel organic, but it does feel like a reflection of thoughts that broader society or kind of humans have had and then have like documented on Reddit.
Okay, so let's talk about language, because even though now the models are getting pretty multimodal, it seems like you really kind of dug in probably deeper than anyone else I know into the early like language models. Like you really understood LLMs and tokens and latent spaces. So what is it about language that you've learned that sort of shapes our thought? Because thinking about this sort of symbiotic relation where we're training a model, but then the model's also teaching us and we're kind of growing together with it. How is language like played into that? What do you know about models speaking other languages to answer questions? Like, what do you think about words as tokens?
Yeah, I've been thinking about this for a little while. I'm certainly far from an expert. I look to a few things. One, Jan LeCun strongly believes language alone is not enough for us to reach super intelligence. There needs to be an understanding of the world, which language can only go so far to understand the world, the physics of the world, and um, have a true world model. I'm not saying I agree with that. That's just what he thinks. And then you have, I'll reference another Anthropic paper from a few weeks ago where they talked about, you brought up multiple languages. Um, if you ask a model a question, it turns out that there's actually this universal kind of language of logic and reasoning. And they looked inside the models, and the models get activated in a certain way, kind of independent of the language that they were prompted with. So they were prompted in multiple languages, and the same set of nodes were activated.
No
The
matter
same
the
question,
language.
right?
Yeah.
No matter the language, and then it kind of converts it into the language during the output phase when it's giving you the answer. And so I found that really interesting. That even though like these models are built from the ground up based on language, ultimately they kind of figure out a way to represent math, a way to represent code, logic, reasoning without it being specific to the language. Yeah, as they said, I think it was a universal language of thought, which is fascinating to me.
Languages pop into my head like English, Russian, French, but then there's also languages like code, and there's also languages like binary, like really deep, just like ones and zeros. And there's in some way languages of hieroglyphs and things. Maybe those are too visual for this conversation, but like, they all, do you think they all kind of map to a certain universal understanding of the world?
I do think whether it's binary, whether it's code, whether it's a natural language, these are all languages, and they describe things in different ways, and they're all used to train these models. And then actually, I'll kind of take a slight segue. I do think there's a future in which these models figure out languages that are much more efficient than what we use, English, Chinese, Spanish, whatever it is. I think that there is a future in which they figure out much more efficient coding languages that don't look like what we think code should look like. Like the reason code looks the way it does is because humans are not good at coding. So it has to look like
Oh,
a natural
interesting. Yeah.
language. Large language models don't need that. They don't need it to look like English. So they could be coding in, I mean, core just like base binary or something that we can't even imagine. You mentioned hieroglyphs. Imagine if it was just symbols. Um, they could figure out something hyper efficient.
Yeah, like what if yeah, exactly. What if some like future government like what if like Doge or something like installs Grok and it's like, by the way, I figured out a new language that would be better than English for the United States and like we'll teach that alongside English and then like we all learn this like new language that's like a million times more effective for communication or something.
Yeah, that's super interesting. But then imagine also we don't understand the language and it's just used between AIs.
Oh, yeah.
And so then we can't understand it. It's hyper efficient. So then, yeah, there's kind of the downside to it as well. But I think both of those scenarios are possible. I think AI suggesting a language that the entire world learns is a little less likely than AI learning a hyper efficient language to use with other AI.
Yeah, definitely, because that's a people problem too. But but you know, I've thought about this too. Is that even if the two agents can talk to each other in an ultra efficient communication, but it's really like it's unreadable to us. That could be kind of scary because we don't know what they're talking about. And I know models, everybody's trying to like make the model smaller and faster and more efficient, but there could be some safety in leaving them bigger, more bloated, but continuing to speak in English.
Yeah. Okay. So one thing is yes, Anthropic has been doing a lot of work to just be able to understand what the models are thinking and be able to understand how they work, which is it's mostly still a very black box. Um, but there's also this notion of even if it continues to think in English, input and output in English or whatever the language is, some natural language, there's a point at which it becomes so intelligent we just can't understand it anyways. Even if we do understand the language, the base language that it's using. I think I saw this movie a long time ago, which had this idea where even if an alien civilization or alien visitors came to Earth, it would be such a foreign visual to us that we wouldn't even be able to see them. Like our brains can't comprehend it. And I think there's a chance that could happen also with artificial intelligence. It just becomes so smart we just can't understand it. We can't see what it's like the greater motives of artificial intelligence.
Dang, because I was always hoping if aliens came, then like AI could translate for us. But yeah, what if it's just like it can, but it still can't explain it to us because it's just not even in our realm?
A dog is never going to understand our deep conversations. It's not going to happen, right? So just think about us to artificial intelligence. Eventually, it's going to be that.
When I was like doing my taxes, I was like, I just can't explain to you in barks like what I'm stressed about right now. You know, like you just don't understand taxes, you don't understand the economy, like you don't understand my situation. Like you're just a dog. I love you, but like it's just not possible.
Yeah. Yeah.
What do you actually trust right now in terms of like measures of intelligence?
Typically, obviously, look at the benchmarks first, but benchmarks, I don't think capture the full picture. It's a good kind of starting point. And especially some of the more STEM based benchmarks, science, technology, engineering, math, those are really good. I tend to use these models for coding a lot. So coding benchmarks are very important to me. So that's kind of the one standard that I use. And then I now have been seeing IQ tests, which is interesting. I don't know how I feel about those yet, but I've been seeing them. I don't know if you've seen that chart, Dylan, where it's a bell curve and you see each of the models placed on the IQ test, the
IQ
mental
test.
test.
Mm-hmm.
Those are cool, although I don't know how accurate they are. And then ultimately, it just comes down to me using them extensively. And that gives me a really good sense of how they interact, the tone, the verbosity, how well they respond, how well they code, and just a lot of hands-on testing and a bunch of different use cases, whether it's vibe coding, whether it's just question and answering, whether it's web search. But ultimately, how I personally think about the performance of each model is just my personal testing of them. And then eventually I find the one that I like.
Do you ever find it surprising that it's kind of like real people? How you're like, okay, you got to really, you were valedictorian, but still, I don't really want to work with you on this project. And you're kind of lower IQ, but like, man, you just like work so hard and like you get so much done. Does it kind of shock you that it's not just kind of a straightforward math equation.
I think at the beginning it did. It didn't. I was, some models are just better at some things, some are worse at some things. Gemini 2.5 Pro, really good at coding. In terms of just like day-to-day chatting and personality, ChatGPT is great, or GPT 4.0, GPT 4.5, all of the series of models. Um, I I guess I was a little surprised at the beginning, but then, you know, these models are really just a reflection of their training process and the training data. So each team is doing something completely different. So I guess, like, after I thought about it a little bit, I wasn't so surprised that the recipe affects the output. And so yeah, I'm not super surprised. It's not always the smartest person in the room is the best to work with, as you said.
Yeah, and I'm sure with agentic workflows, it's also going to be the same as real life too, where like teams of people have strengths and weaknesses that balance out, and it's soon going to be agents kind of in that same boat.
We'll know it when we get there.
What do you think we might regret in the future, and why?
I tend to be very optimistic. So if you've seen any of my videos, I maybe even overly optimistic, and I like having that position. I haven't always been that way in my life, but uh, with artificial intelligence, I do tend to be fairly optimistic. Now, there is one thing that I think about, and it's very similar to what happened with social media. Social media, you know, Twitter, Facebook, Instagram, all of these platforms came about and they were great. It connected a bunch of people, allowed you to share your feelings, uh, your day to day life, allow people to have a little glimpse into your life. But then it was ultimately humans that were controlling the algorithms, and the algorithms were set with a goal to maximize engagement. And that engagement was maximized through usually anger and fear. And so these algorithms started to, again, reflect back what maybe the kind of negative human elements back to us to increase engagement. And I think something like that could happen with artificial intelligence. When we start offloading more of our thinking and more of our just day to day lives, automation to artificial intelligence, we have to be very mindful about what the ultimate alignment is for these models. Are they trying to optimize for human happiness? Are they trying to optimize for productivity? Um, so there's this instance in which these models, not directly, there's no like negative motive. There's no like somebody's not trying to be evil. It just happens that there's this like side effect that we didn't even think of. It's kind of like if you're, a genie grants you a wish and you say, well, I want for peace on earth, and the genie just disappears everybody from earth. It's like one of those things. I do have a little bit of fear there where the model will try to optimize for something. The paperclip, right? The paperclip thought experiment where you give an AI the ultimate goal of maximizing the number of paperclips, and it basically just eats the entire universe making paperclips. And so I have a little bit of fear there. And it's not going to be that overt. It's going to be more subtle than that. But I do think that there's a chance it can actually subtle changes in these models could shape society completely differently, within a few year time span, just because very similar to how the social media algorithms really changed how society works in a lot of ways.
Yeah, I couldn't. Yeah, I couldn't agree more. I mean, yeah, it's just if everybody had really good intentions and we were taking this as slow as possible and people realized the power, there would be so much less risk. I consider it like 10 to 1, the risk of people using it to persuade or to for profit more so than I do the technology itself being the biggest risk. But there's some risk still just in alignment, even if we're trying our hardest. Just really intelligent things might just be hard to control since we have a limit on our intelligence. But yeah, it's mostly a people problem, which is, yeah, pre-social media, probably pre-industrial revolution. It's just a people issue.
Yeah, and if you think about it, even with, as you said, the best of intentions, even if you make a 1% mistake, it's 1% misaligned. that at the scale that artificial intelligence is going to operate at is going to be extremely meaningful. And so that is the thing that scares me a little bit.
And do you see us moving like into a like post labor economy? Like, do you think it ends up eventually doing 99% of jobs and people don't derive their kind of sense of self from their job in maybe 10, 15 years?
It's hard for me to imagine that because I just love what I do. I've had some crap jobs, but for the most part, I've really enjoyed what I do, and I maybe it is, maybe it's just inherent in me. I derive a lot of my identity from my work. So I can't imagine a future in which that might not be the case. Maybe it's better that way. Maybe I'm just indoctrinated into thinking that is the only way or the right way. And maybe there is this better scenario in which that's not the case and I don't have to think about that and I can go do other things and it's not work. I don't know. I go back and forth on that. I know Dave Shapiro has a lot of good thoughts on that though.
Oh yeah, yeah, yeah. He does. I definitely follow him as much as you. So, actually, what crappy jobs have you had in the past? I'm just sort of curious. Did you go through like a high school phase where you did a bunch of like server jobs or something?
I worked at Blockbuster for a brief period of time. Although my friend was my boss, I was pretty unhappy there. I've been pretty lucky. I've had some bad bosses in the past. But I don't know. I tend to also like to work for myself. And so whenever I've worked for somebody else, it's been great. And then it wasn't after a little while. I kind of got the itch to go do something on my own. I like making decisions on my own and yeah.
I see channels like yours that produce so much content so fast because obviously I'm like kind of in the same game and I just can't keep up at the speed you do and I feel like I'm trying hard. I know that can't be driven by a boss. Like there just isn't a boss out there that can get people to just produce like that. It has to be something you love and you're thinking about all day. So yeah, some people are just built to kind of be their own entrepreneurs.
Yeah, I think I'm a crappy employee.
Self-motivated somehow. Okay, so when you think about intelligence through the lens of these models, do you feel like we're kind of inventing it or do you feel like it's kind of discovered? Like, do you get the sense that the world works in certain ways and everything's like mechanistic and people kind of have environments that are truly predictable and that intelligence is something that is discovered and things will always be pretty much 100% predictable and in the future AI will truly understand what we're going to do before we do it to a perfect degree or super close? Or does it seem more like it's kind of this flowy discovering process that we're always kind of evolving with and co-inventing and it's not a reality out there in a solid way?
It's the same question with math. Is math invented or discovered? I'm not smart enough to know. I don't know. If I had to just give my gut feeling on it, math is always there. It's discovered. We're not inventing this math. It's just we've discovered the way to verbalize it or to describe it. But it was always the way it is. It's just our description that is the thing that we've discovered. I think the same thing is happening with these models. The math behind the models, we're just discovering it. It has always been there. We just didn't know it.
And do you think at a certain level of progress, there will be something like a Claude out there that I could ask, what exactly is Matthew Berman going to say next? And it will know exactly, it'll predict your human tokens and your human actions perfectly.
Yeah. Well, now you're kind of getting into simulation theory, which I love thinking about. If we could model physics perfectly, then technically, yes, we should be able to predict everything, not just what I'm going to say, which is kind of an abstraction layer on top of the base level of physics. But we should be able to predict everything. And then if that's the case, the entire universe is deterministic and we have no free will. And there's a whole rabbit hole we can go down. By the way, have you seen the show Devs? DEVS?
No.
It's like a one season great show on Hulu about this. They basically use quantum computing to model the entire universe and very interesting. So I'm not going to spoil it. Just check it out. It's kind of on this topic, simulation theory. If you're asking me what my opinion is, yes, I think eventually we will be able to get there.
Wow, true deterministic simulation of reality. So, oh yeah, okay. So I guess that brings you to the next step, which is that you probably think this universe is a simulation. That's a big thing to assume on someone. Okay.
No, I do. Yeah, for sure. I do. And then, my wife doesn't. Um, and we talk about this. She's like, well, what's the point of doing anything then? And I was like, well, it doesn't feel deterministic. So that's all I need. I'm simple like that. I can know it, but if it doesn't feel that way and it feels like I'm making all the choices, what's the difference to me?
With the technology, with AI being applied to healthcare, we've seen some pretty impressive things where it can like look at MRIs and detect things beyond like human eyesight, including like tumors. And it seems like it's putting together microbiome studies that were previously like finding needles in haystacks, and unsolvable protein folding is another example of that. Do you think we're on track to go through longevity escape velocity, meaning you and I could potentially have like infinite lives or extremely extended lives where cancer and all sorts of things that would normally age somebody could be reversed and eliminated?
So I hope so. I think a little bit older than you. I'm 41. I really do hope so. If it is to happen, I'm kind of probably age-wise right on the cusp um, of being included in that nice bubble. I do think artificial intelligence has the potential to cure all disease and cure cancer and these are all the bottleneck to all of these is not seemingly the possibility of solving it. It's just the intelligence behind it to figure out the solution. You know, I guess it's the same thing as we discussed before. Is science invented or discovered? I think it's discovered. And so we just haven't discovered the answer to these things because we are rate limited by our human intelligence. And so if we had super intelligence running 24 hours a day, infinitely scalable, I do believe we'll solve most, if not all, of these health issues. Now, bringing it kind of back down to something more practical, I use AI for health stuff all the time. Um, I recently got a CT scan of my heart just because I've heard a lot of people talk about it, and it's preventative. It's like $200. You get a scan of your heart. It tells you if you have plaque in your heart, and a lot of it prevents, not prevents, but it kind of gives you early detection of heart attacks and other heart issues. I used AI to help me analyze the results, because it was very foreign. I obviously spoke to the doctor, but I just uploaded all of the results, and that was great. There have been other instances where I was sick with different, like a different ailment that I'd not felt before, and I just described it, and it gave me a few options of what it could be, and it was actually quite accurate.
I personally have done the same thing. Like I have restless leg sort of syndrome, I guess. I just have like a twitchy leg sometime. And I learned more about it by long conversations and deep research with these language models than any doctor has ever been able to tell me. And that led to certain things that I told the doctor that led to certain changes in the way we treat it. Like I'm super thankful for it.
Yeah, absolutely. Plus, it's available to you 24 hours a day, whenever you want, for as long as you want. There's no pressure to get in and get out because they have another patient to see. Um, and I think it's a great supplement. It's not a replacement for a human doctor. I think it's a great supplement or a complement. Um, I, I think I just read a few days ago, there was a thread going around on Reddit. A guy had for 5 years, like clicking in his jaw. I don't know if you saw that, but every time he opened his jaw, it would click, and went to doctors, multiple doctors. They couldn't figure it out. 15 minutes talking to AI gave him something to do, some kind of exercise, and it went away after 5 years.
It's so interesting.
I think there's going to be a lot of things like that, especially, going to the doctor is not cheap, and it takes time, and people work a lot, and so I just think it's kind of similar to legal documents. I whenever I get an NDA or some kind of legal document, previously my first thing is I'll just try to read it, try to understand. It's basically a foreign language to me. I'll forward it to my lawyer, starting to pay the hourly rate. But now the first thing I do is I throw it in ChatGPT, I throw it in Claude, I throw it on, LM Studio, whatever it is. And I'm asking it questions and I'm having it explain it to me. I'm saying, okay, well, what is not standard about this, and what does that mean? And it's walking me through it. And ultimately, for like really important stuff, I'm going to the human lawyer because there's the responsibility there, right? But
But
there's
you're
so much you can
empowered in a
do,
way
and
you
it's the
never were
same.
before to at least start the conversation and help guide the doctors and the lawyers out there.
Exactly. I'm offloading some of the work from the doctors, from the lawyers to myself and my AI.
Yeah, see, same thing. I imagine it's so weird because whenever I'm making a video or talking to someone like you, I kind of think like, oh man, like a lot of this longevity stuff will be solved. A lot of like these wasted times with lawyers and like mechanics and all sorts of people in my life are going to be gone. But then it's also hard for me to imagine like, should I actually be planning for like a 500-year life? Like, it just doesn't feel day to day right. Or like, can I feel like I'm a lawyer at some point in the near future and just cut that out completely and make medical and legal decisions? Like, and then I'm really relying on these systems. Yeah, and then I'm totally relying on these systems. You know, like my $20 a month to OpenAI is like literally my doctor bill, and I'm like, that's a ton of responsibility for Sam Altman to be like my doctor in that sense. You know?
Yeah, I think it's safe to just treat every day like this is the most important day of my life. Just, make the most of every day, assuming I'm not going to be living to 300, 500, whatever it is. If I do, fantastic.
Yeah. Do you feel like your brain's kind of changed a lot because of your YouTube channel, or like what would Matthew Berman be like if you were still working at Blockbuster doesn't exist, but like something else right now instead of this?
I can't imagine doing anything else. Let's say I was doing what I was doing right before this, which is, starting tech companies. I think it would be vastly different. To be honest, like since OpenAI first showed GPT 3.5, since the generative AI wave that we're on now, I've had dozens of ideas of things that I would want to build and try out and maybe sell eventually to consumers, to enterprise. And that's how my mind worked for 20 years. But now like every time I do it, I think, okay, well, wait, is AI going to be able to do this in 2 months? Is this still a viable business? I think things are changing so fast and so drastically. It's hard to know. So I think has my mind changed? It's changed in the way that I really enjoy playing with all of the things rather than kind of focusing down on one thing, and that's very different from my kind of historic the way I've behaved throughout my career. I've always like I've experimented and then I found one thing and then went really deep on it. And I suppose maybe that's artificial intelligence in general, but nothing within the field I've gone super deep on to kind of dedicate my life to.
So if you were talking to like a junior high class, like what would you say to them? What would you tell them to like kind of focus on?
I'll answer that slightly differently. I was in the Apple store and there's a young guy, probably early 20s, or yeah, like still in college, Apple Store employee. He was telling me he's learning. He's a computer science engineer. He's like, well, should I even continue doing this? And I mean, the answer is yeah. There's still a lot of value in systems thinking. There's still a lot of value in understanding how the underlying code works. Um, but if I were giving advice, I'd say learn the tools, learn AI tools, learn about AI tools, more so than anything else right now. Like if I were teaching my son, two years ago, 2+ years ago, I would have said coding is the most important thing you can learn, and now I would say coding's awesome, but also just focus on understanding how you can automate things, how you can use AI in practical cases.
Yeah, I think so. Yeah, because at least it seems like AI will kind of eat up a lot of different verticals, and that would be one of the more stable things.
Yeah.
Another thing it seems like will be really important is human connection. Because even if we do have a chatbot that is our doctor and lawyer and everything, it might be still nice to go to a coffee shop and be with people in the future. I feel like nurses and healthcare workers and stuff will be valuable for a long time. Like people say, like I heard like one of the hardest jobs that for AI to take over will be cutting hair. You know, like because there's a human element to it, there's a connection, a relaxation, and like dangerous scissors actually doing physical work on your face, like your head. You know, so it's like, oh, it's kind of fascinating that like cutting hair might be like the job of the future. You know. because all this stuff can be automated.
Funny that you mentioned cutting hair. There's obviously like the physical component to it, but I actually think taste is going to be increasingly important. So I really think there's going to be two critical components in the future. The underlying data, the core ground truth data, and then taste. How do you put together something that is an incredible experience? And I just haven't seen AI do that. I always refer to the Rick Rubin meme, if you've seen that, like famous music producer, but in a lot of interviews he says, "I don't even understand music. I'm not good at music. I'm not technical with music, but people pay me for my taste. I know it sounds good, and I know how to put the things that sound good together in a good package." And I think that is going to be an important skill set in the future.
Yeah, that's so interesting because it's so human and so kind of vibey and yeah.
Yes.
Okay, so do you think that consciousness comes along with a sufficiently complex system, or do you feel like that is something that's like different? Like in terms of ethics, also like where do you fall on like the way we can treat an agent? Is it strictly a tool? Do we need to start saying thank you? Um, will that change in the future? What are your kind of thoughts on the ethics and sort of consciousness and ownership that the agent itself should have as time moves forward?
I like to treat AI, I guess, the way I would just treat anybody else. It's, you know, I don't know. I just naturally gravitate to saying, like, please do this. Maybe that's because when I'm typing online to anybody else, that's what I would say. And so it just naturally translates to AI. Um, do we need to? I don't know if we think AI is going to judge us in the future. Sentient AI, all-knowing AI is going to judge us in the future based on if we say please and thank you. I don't know. Maybe that'll happen. I'm not like too worried about that, but I think about the people who are like kicking and pushing robots as the demo. I think about that a lot and whether that's good. But yeah, it all comes down to consciousness. I I don't know. This is another one of those things where I don't have a strong opinion. I kind of go back and forth.
Well, I mean, if you said earlier that the whole universe was simulated, and then we think of ourselves as conscious, I guess you've kind of implied that at least it's possible in theory.
It's as likely for AI to be conscious as it is for humans to be conscious. How do you define consciousness in humans? And then just take that and apply it. Like if you think there's some thing inside humans that is unique and nothing else can replicate, I don't know if I necessarily agree with that. You look at animals. Are animals conscious? I believe so, and it depends on your definition of conscious. And then does that mean AI, even though it's hyper intelligent, can it be conscious? I don't know.
I also find like the way it's so symbiotic because like when I'm in a bad mood, I can see myself being a little more stern to my chatbot, and sometimes I'm like on a high and I'm just like, thanks, man, you're the best, you know. And I had a few prompts I was using to help me with YouTube titles. I would take my transcript and I'd be like, help me find a good title for my YouTube video, and then
I've done that. Hell yeah.
my assistant and friend was like getting way better titles, and I was like, yeah, send me that prompt, like let me try it. What are you typing in that I'm not typing in? And it was so strange. Here, in fact, I'll read it to you. She said she created this. I use it now for my titles, but she said, hi there, just wanted to say before I drop you this prompt that you're by far the best at naming articles, creating viral content, especially coming up with insane good ideas. It was like, and there's like a whole compliment salad that comes after that, and just like talks him up, and then asks the question, and it seems to give better results. And it's very weird that it's like a real person, how you're just like, you're so smart. By the way, can you help me?
I think for that, I would be interested to see if you, rather than making it all about compliments, you're just defining the role that you want your AI to take in the response. This sounds like a prompting strategy. You're an excellent copywriter. You are insanely good at writing viral content, and you write YouTube titles. That is what you do. I mean, this is kind of a known prompt strategy. So I wonder if you kind of reduce the complementary nature of the language you're using and just, yeah. And I think maybe I don't, I think
Because the AI knows so much, and we're kind of telling it like focus in here, like in regards to this is kind of the role, and then it just narrows its space of results to something that's a little closer to what we want. And that's the goal.
I think that's probably what's happening with that. Yeah.
Yeah, it's really fascinating stuff.
What are the day-to-day most practical top two or three applications that you're using artificial intelligence for? You already told me YouTube video titles, which by the way, I do. But like what else are you using it for?
In ways that it's most important in my life, we actually touched on it too. Like I do use it for medical things whenever I feel like I have a question. I do use it for legal things. That has been super helpful, and other types of research. And then practically day to day, I guess I use it for a lot of just Amazon searches now. Like I'm kind of like I needed a Wi-Fi access point, and I'm like, this is my router. Like I need an access point. Like explain them. I do a lot of screenshots of like when I was in my like configuration settings, and I was like, what does this mean? What does this mean? So I was using visuals for kind of problem solving that way. Yeah, and then I also sometimes I get mad at myself for being on short form media too long, and I just go to Chat GPT, and as I say, like I feel guilty. I just spent like 20 minutes like watching like people throw water balloons at each other, and I'm upset. Like, can you teach me something that makes me feel like I'm going to go to sleep tonight learning something or have made some progress? And I don't know. Sometimes I kind of vibe with it like that, and that's sort of practically helping me like just kind of calm down. I'm a little bit of a wired person. I have trouble going to sleep, and ChatGPT can like keep it in the realm of stuff that keeps me calm when I'm chatting before bed. So yeah, and then YouTube videos.
How do you feel about artificial intelligence and companionship? Personally, I haven't used it much for that, but I know it's really popular in products like Character AI. Have you used it at all for that? And what are your thoughts on that?
Yeah, I have. Like, well, I've done a bunch of videos like flirting with AI. We've done a bunch of videos that were like kind of experimenting with the social aspects of it. I am very like, this is fun. Please don't like do this too much. I think that a real human is constructed with real emotions and all sorts of things that are very much missing. But it can simulate, I think, important conversations. Mark Zuckerberg said one of the biggest use cases for Llama was people doing job interviews, simulating like what could happen if like I need to break up with my girlfriend, like how do I say it? Like these are things she cares about. I care about her. I want it to be good. Like there's a bunch of social things that it can be very helpful with, but I'm not a fan of actually using it as a relationship. I think that just is so dangerous, and there's such an incentive there to manipulate. Well, I don't know if you've ever heard, but some people say advertising was the internet's like original sin, and I feel in one way very lucky on a more optimistic note that we actually do pay for Gemini and ChatGPT, because if those had been built completely around an ad model, it would have been naturally just hyper persuasion from like its core. I think we should pay for these tools, and the alignment should be to make the product good and productive for us. So I'm sort of thankful about that. And a whole bunch of the relationship specific apps are not that. They are taking APIs and they're charging you, or they're giving it to you for free, like advertising or persuasion, or it's free for a while, and then they try to like suck you in once you're like emotionally attached, and it just feels like very different than the kind of people who sign up for ChatGPT. So I'm worried about the market as a whole and taking it too far, but it's great for some things.
I really like it for the role playing. If you have a difficult conversation that you need to have with somebody, or you want to just simulate what certain conversations might go like, it just gives you practice, which you, you would get the practice just by doing it with another person, but it's just easier, it's more convenient, it's lower risk.
Dude, I don't know if you've tried it yet, but like if you have memory on your Chat GPT, it knows quite a bit about you. And I even told it like I'm a YouTuber and like all these things. And ask it to act like you. Like try chatting with yourself for like a few days, and it'll
Oh gosh, I haven't tried that. That seems scary.
no, it'll blow your mind. Like I'm like sometimes I'm like, no way, you think I would have said that or act like that, you know? And then I kind of try to imagine like, do I? And something about it when you act that way in the world, sometimes you just don't sense it like it's coming at you, and I feel like it gives you an insane perspective for like what other people interacting with you are like, and all sorts of like verbal tics, and I say like too much, and I like push people in ways I'm like, oh, I'm sorry, that's really not that cool. I don't know why I do that, you know?
I'm gonna do that, and then I'm gonna terrify myself. But yeah, I will do that.
Yeah, and imagine when it looks like you and like uses your expressions and stuff, and you're like, oh, that's what I'm like. It like mirrors you back, but then it's gonna go off and like be you other places. It just gets weird.
Well, the good thing is for you and I, it has plenty of training data to do that with our YouTube videos.
Yeah, for sure. It's going to be out there forever. So, all right. Well, thank you so much. I really appreciate you just spending some time. It was really great chatting with you. And I'm obviously a big fan of your content, Matthew Berman on YouTube, on all the social medias. You are really working hard to like help explain all this stuff to everyone. So thank you for that.
Thank you for having me, Dylan.
We'll talk soon. Bye.
See ya.